what we were thinking that we could do, since we're already kind of doing it, talking about the signs of spring that we're starting to see. As we go around, maybe just introduce yourself as your name and what community you live in, but then open up the chat and write in the chat a fun sign of spring that you either have seen or are looking forward to seeing. And we'll kind of gather up everybody's signs of spring as we're going around the circle. So I'll introduce myself first. Angie Hong, I coordinate the East Metro Water Resource Education Program in Washington County. And the one thing also, for those of you who are good enough with Zoom to be able to adjust your name, could you maybe just add on to your name the initials for which watershed you're with? So then when I break everybody out into small groups at the end, it will be really easy for me to figure out who goes where. So like how Beth has Beth-RCWD for the Rice Creek Watershed District, or Nick's got Velamo for Velamo, and Sage would be a RWMWD. Okay, I'm gonna pass the intros to Nick, and then I'm gonna start typing my own signs of spring.
For my typing, you mean, or for my?
No, just to introduce yourself.
Oh, right, yeah, Nick
Right.
Voss at, yeah, at VLAMO, Vadens Lake Area Water Management Organization. Yep, that's me. I already talked about birds, so I mean, that's the big one.
All right, I see. I'm gonna popcorn it over to Mary, who's on the other side of me on the screen. And then Mary, when you're done, just pick the next person in line to introduce themselves.
Okay. I'm from the Rice Creek Watershed District. Yeah, I've been out trying to find some ducks. There's mergansers around, but it seems like the ice went out so fast that the ducks kind of disappeared. And okay, I'll pick Gary.
Hi, I'm Gary Ellis. I'm with Nick at Blamo, and I wound up seeing a couple. I think they were otters when I was out running. It was early morning, about a week ago, 2 weeks ago. So that was a good sign for me.
Where did you see the otters? I've always wanted to see otters in the wild.
Well, it's I don't know the name of the water, but it's there. It's east of 35W and south of 96, whatever that body of water is there.
The Sucker Channel.
Maybe.
And Gary, I just saw another email and I'm blanking on who sent it, but somebody else just saw an otter as well in our area.
Yeah, that wasn't me. So.
Yeah, I that's so funny because I just got another email about otters recently.
It sounds like, oh, I see Jerry raising her hand. I don't know if she's trying to communicate.
Yeah, I think I muted Jerry earlier, and now I guess I can't unmute. There we go.
Are we unmuted? Okay.
Yep, you're unmuted. We can hear you now.
Okay, this is Jerry and Sarah. We're Beth's little project.
Big project.
With Rice Creek. And we have 2 new bald eagles on our property now. So, well, they're feeding here. Their nest is probably half a block away. So,
And our neighbor saw the sandhill cranes mating out behind her place.
Wow.
yeah, she ogled it. Or is that oogle?
Ogled.
Okay, next.
You have to pick someone.
Who should we pick?
We'll go.
There.
I can't read it. I can't.
Sarah.
Do you see him?
Yeah, he's,
Cece, go ahead.
yeah.
I'm Cece Chaplin, and I'm one
Cece.
of the Master Water Stewards with Nick at Flamo.
And I'm also a water steward. And sign of spring, we went to Crux Meadows, wildlife area on Friday. And it's up by Grantsburg, if you don't know where it is. And highly recommend going. Now, we expected to see a lot of sandhill cranes. They usually come in there by the hundreds in the evening, but they had also moved north. We only saw a handful, but we did see an otter and a beaver and a couple sandhill cranes and
Yeah.
lots of swans, ringneck ducks. So a lot of the ducks and stuff were moving through.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I love that place. All right, who is next? I see Wally right next to you on my screen.
Hi, my name is Wally Wand. I'm calling from Woodbury. I'm in the South Washington Watershed District. And I've noticed that pussy willows have been budding out and also the buckthorn. So this time of year, that's pretty obvious. And I'll pass it to David.
Hey, good evening, everyone. David Nuccio from South Washington Water District here in Woodbury, Wallace. Yeah, trees are budding, all kinds of different birds that are you don't normally see anyway, but this time of the year. So yeah, a lot of exciting stuff going on. And I will pick Brian.
Hey everyone, my name is Brian. I'm with Ramsey County in the Soil and Water Department. I work with Rice Creek with their water quality program, and I'll be giving a short presentation this evening. Signs of spring here. Cut some of our first tulips out of the garden yesterday, so that's kind of nice to see. The tulips are starting to bloom and open up already. Let's see. Ben has not gone yet. Ben.
Hello, my name is Ben Rowland, and I am with the Rice Creek Watershed District and Beth, and I will pass it to Whitley.
Ben, you forgot to say what your favorite thing about spring or what you're noticing.
Oh, shoot, I thought we were doing that in the chat, but I said spring vegetables sprouting.
Okay. So my name is Whitley. I'm a part of the Washington Ramsey Watershed District, and my favorite thing about spring, or what I've been noticing, is just like the smell of the earth, like waking up, like you start to smell the earth. I don't know, that's such a weird thing, but I grew up on a golf course, and that's my like favorite memory thing I noticed about spring right away. I'm sorry, and I will pass it off to Sage.
All right. I'm with Ramsey Washington Metro Watershed District, education coordinator there. And several weeks ago, I went down to the Old Cedar Bridge area and climbed the hillsides, and combination of plethora of marsh marigold and the Dutchman breeches. And I would echo what Nick said in the chat, with more than ever I've ever seen before that species. It's like mega sections, which I've never noticed that. That was cool. And I will pick Jennifer.
Good evening, Jennifer Olsen with Ramsey Washington Metro Watershed District. And I went and picked up 2 native shrubs, 2 serviceberry shrubs a couple of weekends ago at Prairie Restorations, and was able to actually plant them this weekend. It was nice enough to put them in the ground. So I think they'll be fine. They've been outside for weeks and weeks, so they haven't leafed out too much. Really looking forward to seeing how they do as a sign of spring. And I will pick, sorry, I've been a little distracted. Just got here from going into the office for the first time in ages. So in the last second, Desiree, have you spoken yet? No, okay.
Hi, I'm Desiree. I'm with the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District, working with Angie. I have really enjoyed the longer days, so all the daylight. I'm with Whitney when it comes to smelling the earth, waking up, as she put it. And I've been enjoying a lot of wonderful hikes in the state parks that I've been around. I saw some beautiful, I think they're purple wild violets. I don't know if you can see on that. maybe not, but
Oh,
it was just really beautiful that all these beautiful little purple
I bet
flowers.
you those are hepatica.
Yeah, okay.
I can only kind of see, but I bet you anything that's what they are.
All right. It was just so beautiful.
Google hepatica and see if it looks like what you're looking at.
Okay. But yeah, like all this brown and then these three little, or a bunch of them, like 6 of them were sprouting out of the leaves. It was so beautiful. And then, the sounds of the marsh at William O'Brien State Park too have been really beautiful. So I'm really enjoying that.
Great. All right, who is left? I know we haven't, let's see, Sage and Beth, we haven't done you. Gary Kajerchuk, have we done you yet either?
We haven't done
No.
Gary or Claire or me.
Okay. Gary, do you want to go?
Hi, I'm Gary. I live in Bald Eagle Lake. I'm a master water steward and I work with the Rice Creek Watershed, and getting a dock in the water is pretty fun. That's what we do in spring. There are a lot of docks in the lake, but not many boats. Too cold.
All right, who next then? Claire?
Hi, I'm Claire Grutman. Hi, Jennifer. Let's see. I am a Minnesota water steward under Rice Creek Watershed District with Beth, and my capstone project partner Cindy will be joining in a little bit. But I think for me, I received a grant from Rice Creek Watershed District to put in a pollinator garden last May. And I've been, I left everything up and I'm just snooping around every day, and my past flowers are in complete bloom. And so I'm very happy about that. So happy for the spring flowers.
Must be Stephanie and family, huh, that we just heard.
Yep. All right, are you going, Sage?
Well, I did already.
Oh, you did? Okay, so
Yeah.
who's left? Beth? Beth?
Well, yes, but I mean,
Yeah.
Beth, I talk a lot. We've all probably spoken. So ferns, loons, the whole thing. It's like a sensory explosion of spring, and I'm loving it. So it's been a long winter.
All right, here is our here's our beautiful little spring wreath that we made. there wasn't quite as much overlapping words as I thought there might be, but it still is kind of nice. It's like a laurel wreath of sorts.
Are you trying to share your screen?
Is it not? It's not sharing.
Oh, no.
Oh, I see it.
I don't.
Some
Where is-
people do and some people don't. Very interesting.
Oh.
Well,
How many of you see it?
I see it.
It's everybody but you, Sage. I'm sorry.
There it is. I got it. I just had to move that other screen. I just had to move the other screen out of the
That's fine.
Right, great.
That's fine. All right. So I think I am turning things over to Brian, unless Beth, are you introducing Brian?
I'm going to introduce him.
Okay.
So I'm very happy to introduce Brian Olsen tonight. Brian works for the Ramsey County Soil and Water Conservation Department, part of the Parks and Recreation Department at the county. And Brian is one of Rice Creek's best partners when it comes to implementing green infrastructure and water quality and volume control projects in our communities at the local level. He conducts our site visits, works with landowners to help them complete applications for cost share opportunities, provides technical assistance, and when we ask nicely and call upon him, he gives presentations to our Citizen Advisory Committee on identifying opportunities for water quality projects on the landscape. And it was so great. I asked him to make some modifications and do it again here this evening. So I thank Brian very much for coming and giving us this presentation. Brian, I'm handing it over to you.
Sounds good. Thanks for the intro. Let me try to share my screen here. And I got a little presentation. Let me know if everyone can see that. Good. Yeah, so my name's Brian. As Beth said, work with Ramsey. We just call ourselves the Ramsey County SWCD for short, because our department name's a little bit of a mouthful, but anyway, so yeah, I'm just gonna kind of go through a little presentation on basically how we kind of, myself and others at my office, approach, kind of locating, siting, potential rain gardens when we're looking at people's properties, or even some larger areas like an area that's getting road development. And just kind of talk a little bit about how we kind of verify those locations on site. Kind of brief touching on just kind of calculating watersheds and that kind of importance of that. And then kind of just how I go through a design process for rain gardens in particular. But kind of the similar process works for different types of water quality projects, whether that be a permeable pavement surface or something underground as well. But most commonly we're working with rain gardens, so it's kind of the most pertinent one, I think, to kind of go through. So kind of first step is we look at an area. This is an example here to the right. We're looking at a road reconstruction area in White Bear Lake, and just kind of pulling out properties that might be good for rain gardens. So we're looking at a map of the area, looking at road profiles and the slopes of those, where catch basin locations are, and kind of at a larger scale, looking at potential properties that might be at the bottom of a drainage area where we could capture a lot of water. We kind of overlap something like that with also outreach into any residents in the area that might be interested. Obviously, that's an important step too. And then kind of taking a similar area, looking at contour information as well, kind of on the broad scale, just to get an idea of, the land patterns and where kind of the current drainage is. Because obviously if there's collection areas that are already existing, that's going to be our best opportunities to start looking at implementing projects to kind of capture and treat stormwater runoff. And then this kind of also applies on a smaller scale. So down to like an individual property. So this is just an example. It's a church property that we were looking at in Roseville. And we kind of go through the same process, but just on a property scale. So we, kind of look at this map, looking at the different surfaces, whether that's parking lot, roofs, lawn, and kind of get an idea just without even, a desktop analysis, we kind of call that. So we kind of start to get an idea really quickly on where potential things could be implemented, like a rain garden, to capture maybe the roof runoff, or somewhere we can grab some runoff from the parking lot before it gets to the storm sewer, things like that, just to get us kind of initial idea on that. And then we kind of take those ideas and we set up basically site visits with the landowners and do kind of an on-site verification of what we analyzed from just aerial imagery. So kind of one step in this is looking at utilities. So calling in a utility locate is obviously important before anyone starts digging a rain garden. And then kind of on the site, looking at things that we maybe saw, like roof drainage or storm sewer inlet locations that we had maps of, kind of verifying those on site. So like the picture on the top right, looking at this park area, and you can see the catch basin there in the corner of the parking lot for the storm sewer. So all the water from the parking lot's already going there. So if we can maybe implement something just upstream from that, that's probably a good place to pull water off and maybe create a rain garden in the grassy area there. Similarly, like, if there's any areas, there's kind of the bottom left picture is, kind of a marshy area next to a driveway where the water kind of runs off and collects. So, just looking at those opportunities on site, you can kind of start to pick out these spots that are already conducive to potentially creating a project there. So yeah, just kind of looking at the current runoff patterns, things like where the impervious surfaces are, downspout locations is a good thing to look at, where roof drainage is coming off of roofs. And then just kind of checking for any other potential conflicts or obstructions like trees, or, the park had a picnic area there, need to make sure we leave room for the picnic area. And then kind of lastly is a good thing to do is kind of verify soil composition. So a lot of the projects, rain gardens in particular, we're looking to infiltrate into the ground. So we want to make sure that the soils are going to allow for that. So usually we'll kind of look at soil maps ahead of time, and then in the urban areas that's not particularly accurate, just because there's a lot of urban fill. So a lot of times I'll take out a little hand bore kind of soil core and take a little soil sample out and kind of just take a look at that and make sure that it's going to infiltrate the water. And if it looks like it's maybe a little too clay or something, that'll inform us when we're looking at designs of these projects, and potentially we'll change how we drop a rain garden and different materials that might be needed. And then from there, we've kind of, at that point, we've kind of picked out some good spots on a property that might be good for rain gardens. Then we got to start looking at the watershed and what's all drained to that spot. So this example, there's a kind of a rain garden down in the left-hand corner up by the street, looking to kind of create a curb cut rain garden that we call them, and treat runoff from the road and surrounding areas. So just pulling out the different land uses and kind of impervious surfaces versus lawns and trees, areas that has some permeable into it. So we can kind of use that data to create a watershed and start to calculate how much runoff would come to that rain garden, so we can properly size it. I usually use a GIS software to do this, because they can easily kind of map these out and calculate areas. So that works well for that. But you can kind of just, particularly on a smaller scale, you can even do it just on site yourself, kind of measuring out the different areas that flow to a certain rain garden. And then kind of the next step is take that information and model it. So for our process, we use some different modeling software. Back in my school days, we learned how to do this by hand with the equations and everything. But nice thing now is there's lots of programs that run all those calculations for us. So the two most common ones that you'll see around that professionals are using are MIDS and WinSlam. I use WinSlam mostly myself. So that's kind of just the example I'm showing here, and it's kind of all these data entry points in it. But the bottom left, basically you enter in your acreage of roofs and parking lots and sidewalks, and then the program kicks out how much water runs off that for different rain events, how much sediments run off that amount of roofs, things like that. And then the top right, you kind of see, you basically enter the data for what your potential rain garden could be. So based on the site area, how much space you have for rain garden, you kind of enter, maybe you're going to do a 300 square foot rain garden. It's going to have 6 inches of ponding, things like that. Enter that all in, kind of little diagram that shows connecting that all together, and hit run. And the nice part of it is it kind of runs those pollutants for you. And the big three that we model for are volume. We're looking at reducing volume, particularly in a lot of the urban areas. There's some flooding issues and things like that. So that's a big part of us for water treatment, is to infiltrate into the ground so it doesn't run off and end up kind of overloading our systems and the lakes and streams. And then we look at the total suspended solids that is in the water. So that's your sand and sediments and things that float and wash out. And then phosphorus is the other big one, obviously, that we look at. That's a really popular, not popular, but important pollutant to look at. So this, kind of kicks out, how much runs off, how much is going to run off once we implement that rain garden that we designed. And the really nice part about WinSlam too is it pulls out, it has actual rainfall data, historical rainfall data. So you can go and look even per storm and see, if you're getting a full inch rainfall treated, or, maybe you're only treating a half an inch rainfall. So it's really useful data to kind of back up, the benefits of these projects and show that. So, and then the important part for us too is we want to make sure that the rain garden we're going to put in is going to be able to sufficiently handle the watershed and not be overwhelmed when it rains. So that's kind of all the intro stuff. And then we kind of take all that information and basically finalize designs for these. And so generally, this is kind of a back and forth with landowners as part of this too, because, they have certain design requests and things that they want to see. So we make sure to include them through this process. But I like to start with a quick concept with them. It's kind of just a really quick and dirty plan for showing size and kind of rough layout of a project. And then kind of taking that into construction designs and material estimates, things that can be used to actually bid and install the projects. And then that, that includes size, shape, different features of the rain garden, drawings and how that all gets put together. Planting plans is obviously an important step in that. So like I said, so this is an example of kind of that first concept plan that I will drop a lot for people. Just kind of diagrammy, shows kind of where the water is coming from and where the rain garden would be in kind of rough size it would need to be based on those calculations that I had just run. I'll throw on ballpark cost estimates for these on here too, just to kind of get a rough idea on what landowners might expect to have to pay for that and how much, they could potentially get awarded a grant for that project. It's kind of a nice jumping off point, particularly for people that have more than one opportunity for a rain garden on their property. They can kind of see, which ones have the best benefit, bang for their buck, and based on their budgets and things, they can kind of decide if they can do all of them or they want to pick maybe one really important one and focus on that, kind of move forward in the design process. So this is a nice step that I can do quickly, and it really kind of helps them, decide for sure how they want to move forward with the project. And then from there, I take those, the projects that I decide to move forward with and draw up construction designs. So this is just a sample of a curb cut rain garden I drew up for a landowner in White Bear Lake a few years ago. And like I said, it kind of things it all includes is, this final layout of the project with dimensions, exact sizing and ponding depth labeled, all the notes that a contractor would need to know how this gets put in the ground properly. And then kind of that, gets fleshed out in the detail drawings. And so, so kind of, again, working with the landowner in this process so they can kind of review these as I get them put together and make sure that, their aesthetic designs and things are inputted into this, as well as the important technical information that I have as far as size we need to make it and making sure it's going to be treated right and not have erosion concerns. And then, let's see. So then anyway, so that's kind of the process. And then that gets bidded and installed. But I just wanted to touch briefly also on kind of the different elements that are really common that I'll include in rain gardens. So the big one, really big one, important one is pre-treatment structures. So wherever most rain gardens that we'll design have kind of one or two, specific spots where that water enters the rain garden. So looking at getting something at that spot that helps slow the water as it enters to limit any erosion concerns, and also get some of that sediment and debris, leaves and sticks and sand from the roads or something to kind of drop off and get captured in one area that's easy to clean out. So that stuff doesn't wash into your rain garden and plug it up over time. So these are just a couple examples. You guys have probably seen a lot of these around if you are driving around and never look at rain gardens, but they have the rain guardian structures, this kind of circular turret, and they have a box turret where the water kind of flows in, gets stopped up, slows, and then flows into the garden and kind of captures the sediment. And this one on the left is a concrete block one that we build a lot that works really well on small residential rain gardens and curb cuts. Where just kind of the water flows in, steps down, kind of pools there and settles a little bit before it flows into the rain garden. This one's nice. It's very, really easy for contractors to install. It's pretty affordable and does a really great job. So, and then this is that, what we draw up, what the contractor sees to build that concrete block one. So that, it's kind of simple and easy, but gets the job done nicely. So these are really important, like I said, just to kind of get that initial flush of sediment and debris that washes out a lot of these watersheds. And then kind of the other part of those areas where the water comes in, these inlets for the watershed, there's a lot of different ways you can have the water enter your rain garden. So whether that be, this bottom left here is a channel drain, so the water flows into the channel drain and then goes over. I talked about kind of top right here, it's got one of those box turrets. And then also even, just something as simple as kind of a rock swale just to armor a little bit where that water can kind of flow in and trickle into the basin area. And then even in some places, it can be as simple as just water that flows over the hill and down into the rain garden. This one just has kind of general overland flow. There's not a kind of specific concentrated point to this one. So sometimes it can be as simple as that, where it's just a lower area on a property where the water is kind of naturally collecting, and then just kind of making a more formal, functioning rain garden at that location. And then, part of these inlets, like I mentioned before, is a lot of times it makes sense to include those pretreatment structures to capture extra sediments. And then kind of another, these things can get complicated. So sometimes we'll be looking at larger watersheds and including things like, drain tile connections to catch basins and things, and under drains. So drain tile is kind of this next level of complexity that they get to sometimes. So, this one on the right is, we're putting catch basins down at downspouts and bringing a drain tile out to the rain garden location. And then, so drain tile can serve as an inlet to rain gardens, and it can also serve as an exit out of rain gardens. Sometimes you need a little bit extra flow out of the rain garden so that it's going to drain in time. So that's where we look at putting these under drain systems, which these detailed drawings show. In the bottom right photo is one of those getting installed kind of right near a catch basin. So these under drains, they essentially will take a rain garden, which is an infiltration project, which the water is soaking into the ground and staying in there, and turn it into a filtration project. So the water will filter through the soil, but then go into the drain tile and back into the storm sewer. So there's still some benefits and pollutant reductions, but it allows the rain garden to drain faster. So these sometimes will include if there's an area with a really big watershed and maybe kind of clay soil, so we're not getting real great infiltration. And then actually you can just barely see it in this bottom right photo next to the blue pipe. And then this bottom kind of graphic here drawn up, we will put what we call gate valves in these as well, usually when we install under drain. So you can kind of screw off the cap and turn the valve. So you can kind of control how fast the water comes out of that pipe. So that's actually a really nice feature, because you can close it if the rain garden is draining fast enough on its own, and then, or if it turns out it's a little more, it doesn't drain as fast as you'd like, you can kind of open it a little bit at a time and see how much you need to allow through there. So you can kind of try to maximize your infiltration, because the infiltration is the best thing for the water quality. And then dry creek beds and rock swales is a really common one that you'll see in rain gardens. Really simple solution to help the flow paths of water into and out of your rain gardens, or potentially through rain gardens. This one on the bottom left, it was this channel drain that I had shown earlier, and it empties out into this swale, which takes it kind of down to a rain garden and through there. So they're, can be really effectively used, really simple to install. And then basically helps to limit scouring and just keep water directed the way you want it. We'll use these a lot on what we call flow-through systems. So this one on the top right, the water enters at the top and then flows through and exits the project at the bottom. So it's important to kind of have a pretty well armored flow path through that, so that you're not getting any scouring from that water flow. When we can, we try not to have flow through systems like that, just due to the kind of, flow path concerns. Ideally, what we'd like to have is, we call them offline systems, where the water enters a point, fills up the rain garden to the level of that inlet, and then the rest of the water continues down away from the rain garden. Curb cut rain gardens are a great example of that. Let me just scroll up to a picture here to show you that. Let's see. So this bottom right picture is a curb cut rain garden. So the water flows down the street, goes into the rain garden, but rather than flowing out of a different area of the rain garden, once that rain garden fills up with water, the water will just continue down the curb line. So that's what we call an offline system. So that's kind of ideally what we'd like to see, but that can always work. Sometimes we have to do flow through systems like this one here on the top right. So that's where these kind of dry creek beds and rocked swales can come in handy there. And then another part of that's rain gardens that's really common is creating berms and weir structures. Again, so the weir structures are similar to rock swales. It's just directing overflows or, inlet flows, creating a spot to, again, capture some sediment, and just kind of armor those spots where water is concentrated and flowing through a spot in your rain garden. And then usually that's part of a berm system where we're just, creating that ponding area with a berm potentially. Berms also are great, to create those offline systems. Like I mentioned, sometimes you'll need a berm, maybe along one side of it where the area is lower by the rain garden, and you want to make sure the water is going the opposite direction. So yeah, just kind of, general grading and making sure rain gardens are filling up in the area you want them and also overflowing in the direction that you want them to go. And then when they do overflow, things like weirs and these rock swales create that that overflow in a controlled manner. And then kind of the last main part is, when we're looking at designing these projects, the different elements that we design and include in them is a native planting plan. The plants add great function on a lot of different facets for the rain garden. First and foremost, they have huge root structures and large plant masses. So they, don't allow erosion to happen, and those root structures soak up a lot of water and help break up the soil to infiltrate the water into the ground. And then kind of the bonus features of native plants are they look amazing, they're beautiful, they grow really well in these rain garden conditions. There's a ton of great natives that love to be wet for a little bit and then dry out for a while, and wet for a little bit and dry out for a while. And as you all know, natives obviously have great pollinator and habitat benefits. So always in trying to include a great mix of natives. We use a lot of perennials mostly, including some shrubs where it makes sense. And occasionally, putting some trees in there if there's an area where that makes sense. And if the landowner wants to see some kind of canopy conditions, that helps out as well. And again, something that obviously we workshop with the landowners, as we're putting together this plan, so that if they've got colors or particular plants that they love, we'd like to try to include them as long as that's something that's gonna survive the conditions in that rain garden. And obviously that's something that makes the rain gardens a beautiful addition to someone's landscape. So it's obviously an important factor to someone wanting to kind of take management and love this project in the long term. And then so once it's all drawn up, the last step for me is to put together a list of materials needed to build the project. So soils you're bringing in, plant numbers and sizes, mulch amounts, any concrete or rock work needed, and putting together the list of that so the landowner can package this with the plans and get bids for that contract from contractors to install that. Kind of easy process for them. And then once they have those documents, I put them in touch with contractors sometimes as well, but get those bids from contractors to do the installation. Most cost share programs in the area will require 2 bids minimum to install. So we have those final prices and can use those numbers to submit the application for the funding. And once our cost share is approved, we get to this process of getting them in the ground, which is the most exciting part, I'd say. So this is a curb cut rain garden in Rice Creek area, White Bear Lake, that I designed a few years ago, and yeah, it gets put in the ground, plenty of new plants, and starts raining and they start working. So this is a great picture. I think Samantha actually, when she worked at Rice Creek, took this picture of this rain garden way back then, but it's great because it's freshly done, so everything is kind of see how it comes together, and it's actively raining, so you can see the rain garden functioning, that flowing into that kind of sump structure there. You can see it pooling up in there, and that's where some of that initial sediment drops out, and it kind of overflows the bricks and into the rain garden and soaks them in the ground. So yeah, I guess that's kind of my process for rain gardens and kind of the really important things that we include and design in them. And just kind of things to consider as you look at projects in the future. And yeah, I guess that's all I have. So if there are questions, I can answer any questions.
So I think the exciting thing is, as we get ready to see if people have questions, is that a lot of the same things, particularly early on, that Brian does when installing some of these larger rain gardens, as water stewards, you can also kind of look at the topography of the area, look where the storm drains are, know of your neighbors or people who might be open to something like this, kind of starting to see on the landscape where a good location might be, and then kind of, you know, working with your stakeholders and your partners to you know, implement some of these projects. So were there any questions for Brian?
I have a question. So I have a fence. I'm going to be planning on fencing in the front of my yard, but that's where I was planning on having a rain garden. Do you ever have to work around a fence as a part of it? Just because we want to fence in the front yard because we have dogs and we're nervous that they'll get out. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, no, this kind of goes against, you know, to what I was talking about earlier about just kind of working around potential obstructions and things. We haven't worked around fences a ton just because most of our stuff is not I don't see a lot of fenced in front yards, I guess, in a lot of areas that I'm working in, but you know, there would be ways to kind of, depending on how where the water's coming from, there's different ways that you could get it to a rain garden, either in front of or behind that fence. So whether that be, it's hard to know without seeing the site, but whether that's a dry creek bed like I mentioned underneath the fence, to kind of bring some of that water from one side to the other to where you could have space then for the rain garden. Or if it's, if there's enough space on one side, or on the side of the fence where the water is coming from, if there's enough room on that side to kind of squeeze in a narrow rain garden along the fence and the property line or something. There's definitely ways to work around that and kind of workshop where you'd be able to fit the rain garden and how to get the water to it, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Brian? All right, Brian, I want to thank you so much for coming to another late afternoon evening meeting. Appreciate it. And he does a lot of work with our water stewards and with our homeowners, so it's great. Thank you so much for coming this evening.
I do have one question, if that's possible.
Sure, go ahead.
This is David Nuccio. Brian, do you ever have any homeowners that actually get involved with some of almost like a self-help? Do you always have contractors doing all the work, or is it a possibility if you have talented owners, can they do some of this work themselves?
Yeah, we definitely have that happen. I actually working with a landowner right now who's planning to do a good portion of an installation for the rain garden themselves. A lot of the ones on residential properties, especially if you're looking at something simple like treating the water from a downspout or something, those rain gardens can be pretty simple and small. And we've had landowners who've installed the entire project themselves. They've done the excavating and from the excavating to the soil installs and mulching plants and everything. More common, I get people who will do part of the project. They'll maybe have a contractor come in to do that excavation and kind of for dirt work, make sure the elevation's all right. And then the landowner kind of takes over from there and will do, mulching and plant installation and maybe edging installation themselves. So I'll get that pretty frequently, actually, although do a little bit of a mix. So definitely something that, you can do yourself on your own property. It's really only some of the, it's easier for a lot of people to use the contractor and just kind of go that route, obviously. And then, when you get into the bigger things with pipes and, different kind of structures and things, sometimes that maybe is beyond a lot of the landowners, but for most kind of residential applications, they can be relatively DIY.
Thank you.
I know that with some of our water stewards, not just in Ramsey County, but some of our water stewards across Rice Creek, and then with other folks that have come in for cost share dollars, they will do some of the plantings or other parts of that to keep the cost down, because then we're able to use that either as part of their match, or even just if they want the experience of doing it. So, and one of the things I appreciate is Brian, I know he mentioned it in his presentation, but he really works with homeowners, particularly when we're doing a suite of projects, to at least let people have a choice in color palette, you know, and talking about them from a maintenance perspective. That's something that we always need to keep in mind. If this is someone who's probably, you know, like, do they want a few more shrubs? Do they want more grasses? Do they want more flowers? When do they want them to bloom? I know that, Brian, those are always questions that you're asking people.
Yeah, that's true. In Ramsey, Washington, many of our projects have had a lot of input and questions and dialogue about plant choices, or even design construction aspects. So, or even to the point of homeowners doing, like you say, the lion's share of the work. But we like to start with, you know, concepts and give people a pretty good understanding of why the designs are being developed the way they are. Are there any other questions? Otherwise, we will move to the next part of our agenda for this evening. Thanks again, Brian. Really appreciate you taking time.
Yeah, thank you.
So as a transition, I'd like to have Nick introduce the two water stewards that are going to share some of their stories and hear about their capstone project in Badness Lake Area Watershed Management Organization. So take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Sage. And then we will go on a break right after this. CC and Ed will be logging off quickly, so we're thankful they could fit this into their evening. This is their story of their capstone project from 2019. So they're a few years out, and I'll be handing it over to them and then control the slides. So CC and Ed, just tell me when to switch, and we will go from there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just give a quick introduction about the capstone projects. Two of them focused on erosion, and one, which is the pictures here, focused on a drain that was running off into the street. One thing that was really important to us is that we live across the street from East Vadnais Lake. So everything from our neighborhood eventually flows into the lake. So it's, you know, we figure it's pretty important that we pay attention to the water and what kind of water and so on. So I think we have a great opportunity to make an improvement on the water. This particular project right here is the one in the front yard. And this is where we had a drain on the side of the house that was running off into the street. We didn't have a really good place, your kind of typical place for a rain garden per se, you know, with the layout of the land and stuff. So we were looking for some other ideas. And so the person that we consulted with came up with the idea of running the drain into a French drain and then under our sidewalk. And this is a picture of the coming from the French drain, then in the earth, and then under the sidewalk. And then, Nick, do you have another picture?
That was the original problem, with all the water coming from that downspout and going directly out to the street and then immediately into a drain.
Yeah. Is there one more where it shows the pop-up?
Yep.
Okay, there. So you can see there the very, very well the French drain, and then you saw the tubing under the sidewalk and then into the pop-up. And that was really a perfect thing for us. And we figured all the drainage and stuff on a 1-inch rainfall, and we know that we've gotten a lot more than that, but the pop-up has worked very, very well for us. And as Nick said, you know, we're going in 2 years now, and we've had, you know, very significant rains, and it's gone through the seasons of winter and so on, and it's worked really well. And then we planted native plants then in the area.
Yeah. That's a year after, with all the plants up and blooming. And we were a little concerned because this is like a lower area around the pop-up, and we were concerned about how fast that the water would filter into the soil. So we actually did a test there. And we have clay soil, but we were shocked that it does filter quickly down into the soil. And so we've had no problem with it whatsoever, even in the heavy rains.
And this took off like almost 450 gallons of water that flowed from our roof. Okay, so this is on the south side of our house. This is one of the erosion projects. One thing that's very significant about this project is that most of the erosion was on our neighbor's lawn, but we contributed significantly to it from the drainage off our roof. So we got permission with the neighbor to work with them to improve the drainage. Their lawn was all pitted and it was just really a mess. So the landscaper suggested that we make a bigger swale. So they came in and dug a wider, bigger swale that went down the hill, and then planted Pennsylvania sedge. So I don't know if you have another. Yeah. Okay. So this is, what it looks like immediately, actually, after they planted the sedge, the Pennsylvania sedge. And this goes not only down the hill, but down and around a large part of the neighbor's yard to collect a lot of the runoff. And one thing that I didn't say is that behind our house is we have woods, but then a little bit beyond that is a wetland. So again, anything that's flowing down behind our house and down the hillside is flowing into the wetland. So we really needed to slow that down and get a better setup for that.
I would say that this year, do you have another picture of that, Nick?
No, I don't.
This year, it's amazing how much the sedge has spread, and it is really holding the soil very, very nicely along the swell.
And that took care of about 600, over 600 gallons of water coming from the two roofs. Okay. All right. Next.
Go ahead, Nick. So this was on the other side of the house, and here again, this collected drainage from our house and our neighbor's house, and plus we had two drain down spouts that also emptied into the area there. You can see it on the left. The problem was it ran over the hill, and there was nothing there but a little bit of cloth, ground cover cloth. And it basically had eroded all the dirt off the top of that and was again eroding that whole hillside. So the answer to that and the solution, next slide, was to come in and again put a swell in, lay down the ground cloth so to prevent any kind of erosion, and then basically build a dry creek. And the dry creek not only went down the hill and over the hill, but also we added a small one that came directly from our drain pipe, and you can see that on the right side. And that small rock creek then emptied into the larger one that you see in the middle section. And so this, along the side also, we planted native plants, and you can see those have been blooming very nicely and has really stopped the erosion. We have since come in and put in some additional sedge at the bottom. If you look at the center photograph, at the very bottom, there's a little bit of a bare area. So we went ahead and put some additional Pennsylvania sedge in that area to prevent any further erosion and just have something with longer roots to really stabilize the soil in that area.
So our neighbor participated in this, and he had a gutter drain that was just running down the hillside on his property. And so he redirected his drain so it also goes down the dry creek too. So it was a joint project. So.
Actually, we had very good cooperation from both neighbors on both sides because in fact, we mentioned earlier, a lot of the water runoff came from their roofs as well as ours. And they were both extremely cooperative and helpful in getting these projects done.
And really happy to do it.
Yeah.
This is a picture of a garden tour that we organized for people in living in the Willamette Water District to go around and see. We had about 6 different sites for people to see best management practices, all different ones, and everything from permeable driveway to several rain gardens, and some. They came to our house where they saw the dry creek beds and the sedge planting. This was part of our capstone, and we funded the North and South project that you saw, and the garden tour with the Community Blue Grant. With the Community Blue Grants always have an education community component, and so this is the garden tour. We rented a van and drove people around from site to site. Last year, as you know, people were not climbing in vans together due to the pandemic, but we did go ahead and do another garden tour because people were really appreciate getting to see other people's practices that they've put into place.
Yeah, and that tour was kind of a self-guided tour. So we set up different sites for them to go and visit, and gave them a map and directions and tried to give them some insight into what they would be seeing at each of those stops.
Yeah.
So we're hopeful to get back into an in-person tour, but I don't think that's going to happen this year again.
Yeah. So just one note is that the front project that we did with the pop-up, that was supported in part with the landscape grant from BLAMO. Any questions?
Thanks, CC and Ed.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll just quick add that every watershed has its own unique programs. So this was the great combination, like you said, to use both grant programs. The tour was the way to qualify for a need for the Community Blue, which was to create a public exposure. So these tours ongoing have been the way to do that. We brought it to our technical commission, and they vote on the grants that come in through that program. The other asset was that in addition to the rain garden, the key phrase that we're promoting with the south side in particular is alternative ground covers. So that's covered in the tour, and then we have other places that have alternative turf, and then we really get that whole range of here's your erosion control, here's your rain garden, here's your sedge planting, and then it all comes together as a big conversation. So it's been fabulous and a lot of fun to see.
The other thing that CC has researched this year is we're taking a small part of our lawn and turning it into a bee lawn. And so we have just recently prepared the ground and laid the seed down. So hopefully we'll have a lot of bees and other pollinators by the late spring, early summer.
And we're also removing some lawn for another native planting. So we're inching away. Pretty soon we won't have any. Yay.
So anybody want to buy a lawnmower?
Yeah.
Well, thank you, CC and Ed. We appreciate you sharing your story. And
Your yard's gorgeous. We love it.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
We got time for questions if anybody's got any.
if we don't have any questions, what we're going to do now is take a break. I think we're going to really have about a 6-minute break, just enough to.
Two of my Minnesota Water Stewards here tonight to make a presentation on their capstone. They both applied in 2018 and then partnered to do their capstone. Cindy Petrie is here. And Cindy is from Roseville, Minnesota. Prior to becoming a Minnesota Water Steward, she had participated in Rice Creek's water quality grant program and installed a rain garden on her property. And that's kind of one of the ways she learned about getting more involved. And then I also have Claire Gropman. And she's from Shoreview, Minnesota, and is a master composter. Also has served on the board of Heart of the Beast Theater, for those of you who are who know about them. Claire, do you still work with them?
Yes, this is my, I've been on the board for 5.5 years. Yep.
There we go. Yeah. And this year she was able to access some Rice Creek grant funds for a property on, or a project on her property that she talked about when we were looking at signs of spring that we were happy to see. But tonight I'm going to hand it over to them. I'm going to share my screen for the PowerPoint, and they're just going to tell me when to switch slides. But they worked together to install a project that I'm excited to share about. So Claire and Cindy, take it away. Okay, hold on, if I can just get my screen shared fast. Can everyone see that? Wonderful.
Yeah. So I think we can go to the next screen. Our project was to tackle a project to improve the water quality at Lake Josephine, which is off Lexington Avenue, and there's a Dairy Queen there. It's in Roseville. Anyway, this is a picture you can see of Lake Josephine. And Brian had this in his slide coincidentally because he was the primary person we worked with on this project. But here what we have is it was about a 20,000 square foot parking lot that drained into this little storm sewer that you could see in the corner in this picture. What we did was work with Ramsey County. It was a partnership between Rice Creek Watershed and Ramsey County Soil and Conservation to dig out this turf grass that you see in front of you and install about close to a 600 square foot rain garden.
Yeah, right now in the corner of the parking lot there, you can see there's a storm drain that transverses underneath the grass and another parking lot and flows directly into the lake. So the project was to divert as much of that water as was possible off of this lot.
Okay, next.
Next.
So in October of 2019, the construction began, and you can see on there was a curb cut made, and the pre-treatment structure, the big catch basin, was installed, which has, Cindy, is it 2 pipes? We have 2 pipes coming into this area.
Yeah, the center of the garden is full of rocks, and if they go to the next slide. Yeah, the 2 tube drains, you can see where they feed right into that catch basin there. And the garden, we had, there were like 530 some plants, and I forget the number of different types of them. But the water goes through the catch basin and it goes then into the rocks where it's filtered. And then there is an overflow on the far side. You can see the other rocks that should it get too full, then that's an overflow to handle if it gets too much.
Cindy and Claire, was it like 15 or 19 different species of plants? Does that sound familiar?
That
at least.
Yeah.
Probably close, I think between 15 and 19. I'm looking at the chart right now. I just don't have the
yeah.
But they're all native plants. Okay.
Next.
I'm sorry, I'm having just a little trouble getting my, here we go, got it.
Yeah. So part of the project is Claire and I are doing maintenance. We committed to maintenance of the rain garden itself, and then assist with training of county staff who would then take over the maintenance of it, and then have other outreach projects with it. What you see there is they added a fence to keep people from just kind of walking through. There is not a gate, so if you do want to enter, there's a way to enter the garden. And then the green fence was put up for the first winter. And that's down now, so it looks a lot nicer.
So it's been up for 2 winters now. As also part of this, we've committed to doing some public outreach. And so we had planned last summer to have a rain garden open house at the site where we would answer questions and talk to neighbors and interested residents about the benefits of the rain garden and how it works and so forth, and maybe hold, dispel some misconceptions about rain gardens. We also reached out to the Lake Association, and they intended to, publish information in their Lake Association information that would help neighbors, encourage them to come out and see what's going on. Why is it important? And then things that they might be able to do in their own yard to prevent stormwater runoff and more, chemicals and different things flowing into the lake. However, the pandemic hit, and so we couldn't do any of that last summer, but we can go to the next one.
The first fall that it was installed, it was really dry. So we were hauling water from the lake, and I was out there with my 89-year-old mother-in-law. We were hauling buckets up from the lake, and people would stop by and actually stop and help and ask questions about what was going on. There wasn't signage up. And so we watered from the lake for the first time. And then then the next spring, when it was still pretty dry, Claire had a wonderful idea.
My husband worked for St. Paul Water for forever and ever, and so he knows a lot about fire hydrants. So he suggested that we talk to the city of Roseville about using their fire hydrant and hooking up some roses. So we were able to get a meter from the city of Roseville, hook that up. My husband helped us, turn it on and do all of this stuff. And then we got a bunch of reused, extra hoses from somebody who was getting rid of them, maybe 10 hoses. So we go from Lexington Avenue hauling hoses from the fire hydrant all the way down to the rain garden. It worked really, really well. And it was certainly easier on Cindy's mother-in-law. So she didn't have to carry them by buckets anymore. So
it works great.
Yeah. And Roseville ended up donating the water to us. We didn't have to pay for the water. So that was nice.
Yeah. So we're yet to see what's going to happen this year. We haven't done the real cleanup yet, and there's a lot of leaf debris in the garden. So in a couple of weeks, we're set up to go and clean up and see what happens. The first year, most of the plants came back. There was some Joe Pye weed, and there was some other Monarda that didn't make it. But most of the plants came through the first winter just fine. So we'll see what happens with this one.
So some of the things on our wish list that we're hoping for this rain garden, it would be great if you guys took a drive through there and checked it out, but is to collaborate with Metro Blooms on a rain garden maintenance class that, that could also be something that we would have considered doing on a public event as well. But we are eventually going to have to train the Ramsey County group on how to maintain and clean this. So that's something that we can work with Metro Blooms. We'd like to put some signs on the garden so people, they understand what they're looking at. Why is this here? What's it doing? How is it important? And then having maybe, those little QR codes that you see sometimes on signs. You just take, like menus everywhere have them right now. You take a picture with your cell phone of the QR code and it pops up an internet site that gives you information. So we'd like to maybe do that, where that would hook into a website at Rice Creek Watershed District that would identify, here's the plants you're looking at, here's what this, a lot of info that someone who is interested could look at on their own that way. So like we mentioned, that some of this is on hold and so forth. And this appears to be the sign, Beth, that we're getting, right? You're on mute. Oh, She disappeared.
That was a fail. I got so excited. Yes, the signs were delivered late in the fall, and I'm just gonna leave it at this. Can you guys see it right here?
Yes.
What are you seeing? Are you seeing the sign?
No.
I apologize.
Do you know when it's going to be installed?
It's going to be installed as soon as my Green Corps member, Ben Rowland, who's on this call, can help me get out there and do it.
Okay.
There was some staff shortages at both Rice Creek and at the Conservation District last fall when they arrived. And so we just said we would install them in the springtime. So we are going to do that. I'm hoping within the next few weeks, but definitely sometime in May.
Cool.
And
that's exciting.
Yeah. And then and Brian Olsen, who did the presentation earlier, he was key in developing the signs, just in starting them. Then we also are working with Metro Blooms already to get their sustainable land care class scheduled as well. So we're hoping to see that happen. I'm just going to stop the share because this was an epic Zoom fail. So I apologize, Cindy and Claire, for imploding there at the end of your presentation.
Any questions?
There was one in the chat from Wally, who asked what rain garden maintenance will be needed going forward.
Well, there's the catch basin that comes off the curb that garbage collects in. So anything that touches the surface there ends up in that catch basin. So that got cleaned out last summer, correct, Cindy?
Yes.
One time, right?
Yeah, I think Brian was saying that they were going to try to do it twice a year. And we're looking at how, so those two plastic tubes, they fill up with debris that comes from the catch basin that's supposed to flow into the rock center. And I've been cleaning that out after they cleaned out the catch basin so that it just doesn't get filled up again. Picking up garbage. I go and check over every couple of weeks and clean up the trash that's left. The most disappointing I found, somebody had dumped, they had a campfire, but a grilling thing, and all of the coals got dumped into the garden. So I cleaned that out. But other than that, it's just kind of stuff that blows around. And then some weeding, trying to keep things that aren't supposed to be there and really give the native plants a chance to really grow so that the weeds and the creeping Charlie and that kind of stuff doesn't get into it.
We think after this summer that it won't need watering, of course, or weeding after the plants get established. Everything will get big enough and spread, so it'll compete the weeds, we hope. And then we're waiting for a good time after, it's safe for pollinators and so forth to go in and take some of the bags of, leaves and so forth that have accumulated over the course of the winter and the fall. And so we'll just take those out of that.
Yeah. And what about the process of cutting back vegetation in a timely way to kind of avoid, because that's eventually what you end up doing in these kind of rain gardens. Do you have a plan for that, or would that be part of it?
We'll see. I'm sure that, it's really fun to go over there and kind of see how it has changed and just clean it up, and it's not a big deal. And so we don't plan to just abandon it.
Yeah, I was just bringing that up mostly for the benefit of anybody else doing, community garden projects like this. That I'm trusting that you'll have that kind of eye on it, but it's just bringing it up as another task.
Yeah, we're doing it this year and then last year, and then the idea is to pass that off to the Ramsey County Parks group and train them on what and when they need to be doing that.
Yeah. That's good.
Because it will become less intensive over time. And the Ramsey County Parks Group, there are multiple of these, kind of public rain gardens that organizations have had to do for permitting or to do projects. And so they partnered with us with that agreement that they would take it over. However, we may do like district cleanup days or things where we bring in water stewards or other volunteers to some of these kind of public rain gardens to help out over the years, but it won't just fall on Claire and Cindy after that. Desiree asked, did the grants cover 100% of this project? And the answer is no. Rice Creek paid for, I believe, 75% of the installation. Rice Creek also paid the conservation department or division for Brian to work with Claire and Cindy to develop the plan and all of that. And then that 25% of the implementation match was brought to the table by the County Parks Department. That's part of what our water stewards do, is because because their project was on public lands, they were bringing all of the public partners together to the table. One of the things I might add is that you guys used a sub-watershed assessment. You used a study that we had at Rice Creek, and Lauren San Pedro and myself to kind of find the project that they were most interested in. So both of you have done projects on your property. So they've been very fun to work with.
There's another question in the chat from Jennifer. Is there a vendor that you recommend for signage? And then if landowners are willing to help pay or fully pay for printing, who do watershed districts go to for information signs? You want to respond to that, Pam?
Well, for us, we've got for our bigger projects, we've worked with Vacker and then Brian and some other artists to create signs that are going to go into these projects. We also have a variety of smaller signs that we use for smaller projects. We're just putting in another order for kind of water quality planting things. But I think there's quite a few signs. I think each watershed, we provide signs if the resident or the project partner wants it. We're slow. These signs took a lot longer to get done, and that was just a function of staffing and skill sets. But how does Ramsey Washington do it, Sage?
Well, for stewardship grant projects, we have small signage that we provide to homeowners or to others. If they're larger scale projects, then we have a design approach that we use for some of those larger, like if in the case like your project there where it's on public land, we might contract for a design that sort of matches some of our styles and acknowledges the partners on a grant like that. So depends on the scale of the project and situation. But we generally try to at least do some kind of signage for any kind of grant project.
I'd say we're the same as both of you. We've got little signs that are about this big that people can put in their yards for native plantings and rain gardens. And then just like you, Beth, we work with Vacker. We've worked with Dogtooth Design also for making large interpretive signs that are going at parks and other high visibility public areas. So, yeah.
Are there any other
one
questions?
more?
Yeah.
I've enjoyed fast signs. It's more of a basic sign that they don't do very much in terms of the intricate pictures or things like that, but for getting something turned around and getting some plain text and a picture together, they really do it like their name says.
Yeah, I do have a couple of those. Advantage sign is one that if we have the time to design it ourselves, we can get it printed on aluminum like the way a road sign is printed. And those are so cheap because we can get a sign printed for, you know, $100 and it's big, like a big $100 sign that is weather resistant and lasts, but it doesn't look like an interpretive sign. It looks like a road sign. So there's kind of a give and take there.
So this is Jennifer again. Can you talk about how much the VACR signs range from, like small signs to large signs? What do they cost generally?
Well, I can look. Well,
and there's probably a quantity, right? You probably have a minimum number.
Right. I think with this sign, oh gosh, let me.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. I stumped the Rice Creek staff is a good game. I like it. Keeps me on my toes.
I feel like when we've made signs with them, it's been at least $1,000.
That's a larger project sign.
Yeah.
These did not cost us that much.
Okay.
Are you talking about like the one that will go in at the Cindy and Claire worked on that project?
Yeah, this one did not cut. Honestly, the most expensive part was the post. The post was the most. Post almost seemed more expensive, and the casing for that. Gosh, I apologize. I'm gonna try to find it here. I'm not doing a good job. I think maybe it was 300, 400. We were buying quite a few.
Okay.
So it was like 300 or 400 for the sign, maybe not even that much. And then, you know, that again for the post. So they were pretty reasonable. We are doing an order of kind of smaller signs and they're $40, $50 a pop. And that's what we're going to put, like, make available to people that are doing our mini grant program. And then, yeah. So, but if you're interested, I can get you more information. They're an easy company to work for. They did the signs at the Blaine Wetlands Preserve.
Yeah, I was able to pull up real quick some ones that we did with VACR. I guess they were more expensive because they had custom cut to them. So they were for a park, and like these ones had these little cubes spin. So it was designed so at the park, you know, like the kids could twirl the little things around to see what different parts of the park look like at different times of year. And they had, you know, these custom cut and interactive components. So it was quite a bit more expensive than just doing a regular sign.
Yeah, those are park signs. Those are park signs. Yeah. Yeah. So when we had ours designed, we had them done for the most common water steward projects. We have a shoreline restoration project with riprap sign. We have a shoreline restoration project without riprap sign with native vegetation and buffers. Got a rain garden, and at the same time, we were creating an informational sign around stormwater ponds that people could post at their stormwater ponds. So. Any other questions?
Well, we are ahead of the game by 4 minutes for going into our breakout rooms, which I think is fine.